Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey will take us into one of the most subtle mysteries of your mind. Why you feel time flowing in a single direction, always forward, never back. But before you settle in and get cozy, I'd love if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Only if these gentle explorations truly bring you a sense of calm. And when you're ready, leave a comment to let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always such a quiet joy to see all the places we gather from, each of us in our own little moment of time. Now feel free to dim the lights, perhaps let a soft fan hum in the background, and allow your body to settle. Together, we'll ease into this exploration of the arrow of time, why your brain builds it, why you feel it, and why it sometimes moves like a river and at other moments hangs still like mist. And if your mind begins to drift as you listen, that's perfectly all right. Let it wander. The story will continue gently, waiting for you whenever you return. From the moment you wake up in the morning until the moment sleep pulls you softly back into the dark, you live inside a quiet assumption that time is moving forward. You may never say it aloud, but every thought, every plan, every memory rests on that simple direction. You assume your coffee will cool and not warm itself. You trust that you can walk across a room without suddenly finding yourself back where you began. You expect that each step carries you deeper into the day and not out of it. And in some gentle, almost invisible way, the mind clings to this direction as if it were one of the most natural truths of existence. But when we pause and breathe for a moment, something curious appears. Why do we feel this flow so strongly when nothing in our direct experience lets us touch it or see it? Time itself leaves no footprints. You cannot cup a handful of it. You cannot place it on the table. If we try to imagine time without direction, our thoughts slip like sand, and the idea falls apart before we even understand what we're holding. So instead, our minds organize the world into a kind of soft narrative. Morning before afternoon, childhood before adulthood, cause before effect. This sense of order becomes the frame through which everything else makes sense. From early childhood, you learn this order long before you realize you've learned anything. A parent tells you, first we put on your shoes, then we go outside. A teacher lines up your school day from recess to lessons to lunchtime. You listen to stories, each built on the rhythm of beginning, middle and end. And slowly, this pattern becomes the invisible grammar of your mind, a way to stitch moments together so that your life feels like a continuous thread rather than a handful of loose beads. This stitching is not something you consciously decide to do. It happens beneath your awareness, like breathing, or like the way your eyes adjust automatically to the shift between sun and shadow. Your brain collects fragments, sounds, sensations, colours, emotions, and assembles them into a smooth film that appears to run from past to present to future. You don't experience each moment as a mathematical point. Instead, you experience a warm continuity, a gentle procession of now that keeps unfolding. Imagine sitting beside a window on a quiet evening. Outside, a street lamp flickers, a leaf drifts down through the air, a bus sighs past. Each of these things happens at its own moment, yet your mind places them in a sequence you don't have to think about. The flicker came before the leaf fell before the bus appeared. These moments feel placed by some inner hand, arranging them in a line so clean and stable, you barely notice the work being done. But that simple ordering, this happened before that, is the foundation of your sense of time's arrow. And yet, the universe itself does not label moments as before or after. If you are somehow able to step outside the flow and look back from far above, the way you might look down at the winding path of a river, you would see events simply spread across the landscape of existence. Nothing in that landscape insists that it must be walked in one direction. But your mind does. Your mind leans naturally toward the idea that the present slides forward, that the next moment will replace this one and the next will follow that. Without that leaning, life would feel chaotic, without shape, impossible to understand. When scientists examine the smallest building blocks of nature, the level of atoms and particles, they find something even more puzzling. At that tiny scale, the rules seem perfectly comfortable running forward or backward. The equations behave the same way in both directions. Nothing about them forces time to march ahead like a parade, and yet your experience insists that forward is the only way to go. It is as though the mind paints a direction onto a world that, at its deepest level, doesn't provide one. That is where this journey begins, with the recognition that the arrow of time is not a single phenomenon but a meeting of two worlds. One world belongs to physics, full of subtle rules about how things change. The other belongs to the mind, full of sensations, memories, and expectations that give your life its sense of unfolding. When these two worlds meet, when your brain interprets the countless small changes happening around you, they create something that feels like flow, like motion, like a path you can walk. As you listen, let this idea rest lightly. Perhaps the arrow of time is not simply something you pass through. Perhaps it is also something your mind helps create. And in that gentle possibility lies a deeper understanding, one that will guide us quietly into the next stretch of this exploration, where memory begins to shape the past behind you. If you sit quietly for a moment and simply notice what is happening in your awareness, you may realize something subtle. You do not experience the world as a series of disconnected fragments. You experience it as unfolding, even if the mind wanders towards something that happened earlier in the day, or to something you still need to finish tomorrow. It wanders along a path that still feels like it has direction. Thoughts stretch backward and forward, and yet they feel anchored to a central, ongoing now. This sensation of continuity is so natural that we rarely question it. But beneath that sense of smooth movement lies a remarkable feat of the brain. Your senses, on their own, do not deliver a continuous stream. They send bursts of information, tiny flashes of light, pockets of sound, sudden touches, each arriving in uneven pulses. Vision, for instance, works almost like a camera that takes many small snapshots. Hearing comes in tiny waves. Touch is even more fragmented. But your mind does not present these experiences to you as a stuttering series of frames. Instead, it blends them into a soft, uninterrupted flow. It is as though someone is constantly smoothing the wrinkles out of a sheet, so that it lies flat, clean, and seamless. This smoothing happens in part because the brain gathers incoming experiences and holds them for a very brief moment before revealing them to you. Scientists sometimes describe this as a window of integration, but you can imagine it more gently, as if your mind gathers all the sensory notes in a small wooden bowl, giving them a gentle swirl before handing them to your awareness. This swirling is so rapid and subtle that you never notice it, and yet it is what allows you to experience a single, unified present instead of a jumbled mix of sensations. Another part of this smoothing comes from the brain's instinct to arrange events in order. When something happens, your mind quietly asks, did this come before or after the thing that happened just now? You might think this is simple, but it is one of the foundations of how you understand the world. Imagine hearing a door close and then, a moment later, hearing footsteps. Your mind links them. Someone closed the door, then began to walk. You don't consciously compare timestamps or do any silent calculations. You simply feel the sequence. This ability to place events into a story, first this, then that, begins early. Before children understand the meaning of minutes or hours, they already understand before and after. A toddler sees a cookie break in half and instinctively understands the direction in which the event happened. If the cookie suddenly reassembled, the child would not just be surprised. The event would feel impossible, because their sense of temporal order has already formed. But even beyond childhood, the brain never stops weaving. It continues to create an internal story moment by moment. You can feel this when you think back on a simple memory, such as walking home on a rainy evening. In the memory, the puddles, the umbrellas, the reflections of streetlights, none of them appear as isolated photographs. They appear as part of a single movement. You recall the sound of raindrops before you recall the smell of wet grass. You remember the cold wind brushing your cheek before you remember the warmth of stepping inside. Even long after the experience is over, the brain maintains the order, keeping each detail aligned along a timeline. And it is not only memory that shapes this sense of flow. Attention plays its part. When you focus on something, a face in a crowd, a melody drifting through a cafe, the slow swaying of trees at dusk, your awareness curves around it, holding it steady while the rest of the world moves. Your focus acts like a little lantern, illuminating pieces of experience and placing them gently into the story that is your present. Without this lantern, the world might feel disjointed, like pages from different books mixed together. But with it, even shifting sensations feel as though they belong. Underlying all of this is something even quieter: expectation. Your mind is always preparing for what might happen next, even in the most mundane situations. When you pick up a glass of water, you expect it to feel cool and solid. When you turn a doorknob, you anticipate the gentle give of the mechanism. When someone says your name, your attention turns toward them before you even decide to look. These small anticipations fill the gaps between moments, helping your brain glide from one experience to the next. The flow you feel is partly the world as it is, and partly the world as your mind predicts it will be. This predicting, this arranging, this smoothing, together they form the soft conveyor belt on which your experience moves. Without it, time might feel like floating fragments, each slipping away before you can hold it. Instead, you feel carried, not rushed, not pushed, but carried along a path that seems to extend behind you and ahead of you. A path that feels natural, as though it has been there all along. A path that feels like the flow of time. If you close your eyes for a moment, you might notice that your mind is already doing this work. Thoughts appear and fall into place without effort. Images glide from one to another. Even in silence, there is a gentle sense of movement inside you. That sense is not given to you by the world. It is created by your brain, continuously, endlessly, quietly. As we continue this journey, we'll step into the heart of this construction, memory, the great architect of the past, where the arrow of time begins to take on deeper meaning. If you think back to a moment from earlier in your life, perhaps a birthday, a walk at sunset, or the first time you tasted a food that later became your favourite, you might notice something remarkable. You don't simply remember the event the way you remember a fact printed in a book, you re-enter it. A small part of you steps back into the scene. You can almost feel the air, hear the faint background sounds, see the texture of the light. This ability, this quiet miracle of reliving the past, is one of the most extraordinary things your mind can do. It gives you a past that feels like it still exists somewhere behind you, waiting for you to revisit whenever you close your eyes. And yet, for all its richness, memory is not a recording. Your brain does not store events the way a device stores photographs or audio. Instead, it stores patterns, soft networks of associations spread across the senses. When you recall an old experience, the brain rebuilds it, gently piecing together flavors of sensation, fragments of emotion, and the echoes of what you once felt. It is as though your mind keeps the ingredients of the moment in little jars, and each time you remember, it mixes them again. Not perfectly, not identically, but beautifully enough that it feels real. This reconstructive nature of memory explains why the past feels like something you can enter and explore. You're not retrieving a file, you're recreating an experience, and because of that, memory becomes more than information, it becomes a landscape a place with texture, colour, temperature, a place you can walk through, even if only in the quiet cinema of your mind. This kind of memory has a name: episodic memory, the memory of lived events. But the name itself sounds more technical than the reality feels. In practice, it is simply the feeling of "I was there." It is what lets you recall the smell of a relative's cooking long after they've gone. It is what lets you revisit the taste of a childhood dessert, even though decades have passed. It is what allows a single moment of your life to return to you with such clarity that it brushes your thoughts like a gentle hand. You might wonder how the brain does this, especially when so much time has passed. The answer lies in the way memories are woven into your senses. When you lived through an experience, your brain captured not only what happened but also how it felt, what you saw, what you heard, the emotional tone beneath it. These sensory threads are stored across many regions of the brain, not in one tidy location. When you remember, these threads are pulled together again, forming a picture that feels alive. Even the softest detail, the colour of a chair in a room, the sound of someone's laugh, can serve as a thread, tugging the whole memory back into view. This fragile, layered reconstruction gives memory its unique warmth, but it also means that each memory is slightly different each time you revisit it. The act of recalling is also an act of reshaping. Scientists often say that memory is constructive, but for you it simply means that the past is something your mind continues to participate in. It is not locked away, it grows with you, quietly changing as you change. This construction is also why memory sits at the core of your sense of time. Without memory, there would be no before for you to stand on. Every moment would feel isolated, as though you were waking into the world again and again without knowing where you came from. It is memory that gives you the sense of having travelled from somewhere, a sense that your life stretches behind you in a long, soft line. Consider how strange it would be if you could not relive anything that happened just minutes earlier. Eating breakfast would feel like something someone else did. A conversation would vanish the moment it finished. You would lose the feeling of continuity, the feeling that your day had a shape. Without memory, your life would become a series of disconnected flashes, each bright but fleeting, without a clear thread tying them together. Memory also helps you understand cause and effect. If you notice a cup on the table and then see it lying shattered on the floor, your mind instantly fills in the missing piece. The fall happened between those two states. You didn't witness it, but the shape of the world, intact cup, broken cup, tells a story. Memory teaches you that stories have direction. Something was whole, now it is broken. Something was quiet, now it is loud. Something was growing, now it has finished growing. Every memory you create adds another link to this chain, and each link contributes to the feeling that your life is unfolding in a direction, that there is a path behind you marked by the little footprints of your experiences. It is easy to overlook this because memory is always working in the background. But if you pause, you might feel it. The way your past rises up when you smell a familiar scent. The way a song stirs a moment you thought you had forgotten. The way the mind blends the emotional colours of experiences across the years. This living connection to the past forms the very foundation of time's arrow. It is the reason the past feels solid, while the future feels like mist. As we drift further into this exploration, we will discover why the brain does not simply store the past, but also uses it to shape the path ahead. How memory and imagination share the same roots, and how this connection gives the flow of time its quiet momentum. If you close your eyes for a moment and try to recall something that has not yet happened, you may notice an unusual emptiness. You can imagine possibilities. Yes, tomorrow's breakfast, a conversation you hope will go well, a trip you might one day take. But none of these images feel anchored the way a memory does. They do not carry the weight, the texture, the quiet certainty of a moment that has already passed through your hands. Instead, they drift like mist, soft, shapeless, and ready to dissolve the moment attention slips away. This gentle difference between memory and imagination sits at the heart of why time feels like it flows in only one direction. The past feels solid, the future feels open, the mind stands in between, reaching back with one hand and forward with the other, but with very different kinds of touch. To understand this difference, imagine walking along a sandy beach. Behind you, each step leaves a footprint, a clear impression pressed into the sand. No matter how far you walk, if you turn back, you can see the path you created. The earlier steps, the deeper ones, the scattered marks where you stopped or shifted your weight. Those are your memories. Even if the footprints fade over time, you know they were truly there. You stepped there, your foot pressed into the sand. The path behind you is not perfect, but it is yours, and it is real. Now imagine the sand ahead of you. It is smooth, untouched, a wide, open surface without marks or hints. You can picture what the next few steps might look like, but until you place your foot down, those impressions exist only in imagination. This is the future. It has no footprints yet because nothing has happened there. And your mind, for all its power, cannot walk ahead of time and leave footprints for you to discover later. The past leaves marks, the future does not. This gentle truth sounds simple, but it emerges from something profound within the brain. Every time you form a memory, your brain changes physically, not in a dramatic way, not like carving initials into a tree trunk, but in delicate shifts across tiny networks of neurons. These shifts require energy, and those energetic processes create subtle ripples of change in the brain's internal state. You can think of these neural traces as the footprints in the sand. They are the physical consequences of an event that truly happened. This is the crucial part. The brain can only create these traces after an experience, not before. It cannot carve a mark for something that has yet to exist. That would be like trying to cast a shadow before the object is formed, and because the brain cannot store traces of what has not happened, it cannot give you memories of the future. There is something comforting in this unchangeable order, even if it restricts us. When you recall a moment from the past, your brain reactivates the patterns that were shaped by the original event. The smell of a certain meal, the way the sunlight looked on a quiet morning, the feeling of someone's voice. Each returns because the physical traces are there to guide them. These traces cannot come from the future because no future event has pressed itself into your mind in the same way. Only the past has had that opportunity. This directionality is deeply connected with how your mind understands cause and effect. You accept that a window breaks because a ball strikes it, not the other way around. You accept that a candle melts because it burns, not because the wax suddenly chooses to reassemble. Moments do not arrange themselves into stories by accident. They flow in a direction shaped by memory. You know which moments came earlier because your mind carries the traces of those moments, while future ones remain untethered. This asymmetry gives the past a weight that the future does not have. When you remember something that truly happened, there is a gentle density to it, a sense of "this belonged to me." When you imagine something that might happen, no matter how vivid, it carries a softness, a possibility, a kind of openness that sets it apart. And you feel this difference instinctively, even without thinking about it. It is the difference between walking backward along a familiar path and gazing ahead at an empty horizon. Sometimes people wish this boundary could be crossed, to know what will happen, to feel tomorrow with the same clarity as yesterday. But such a crossing would shatter the delicate structure that holds your experience together. Without uncertainty, there would be no anticipation. Without anticipation, no hope. Without hope, much of the emotional rhythm of life would vanish. Even the simple pleasure of waiting for something good would disappear. The empty sand ahead of you is not a flaw. It is part of what makes your journey meaningful. And yet, the future is not completely disconnected from you. When you imagine tomorrow, your mind draws from the architecture of yesterdays you have lived. the way you expect a conversation to unfold, or a day to go, or a choice to lead somewhere. All of these things come from patterns learned in the past. Your imagination is built from the same materials as your memories, but arranged more loosely, like a watercolour painting instead of a photograph. You cannot remember the future, but you can paint it using the colours stored in your mind. This delicate arrangement, solid traces behind you, soft possibilities ahead of you, creates your arrow of time. It makes you feel rooted and open at the same moment. It makes you feel like you come from somewhere and are headed somewhere, and it helps shape the path your thoughts will follow as we move deeper into the landscape of memory, where the past becomes something like a map, guiding your understanding of what might lie ahead. When you look around your room right now, at the arrangement of books, the position of a chair, the faint crease on a pillow, you are looking at the present. But within that present, there are quiet clues of what has already happened. The way a bookmark sticks out from a page tells you someone has been reading. The crumbs on a plate reveal that a meal took place. A jacket draped over a chair shows that someone recently came home. The present is never empty. It is always layered with the soft residue of the moments that preceded it. These imprints are everywhere in the world, and they form a subtle language that your mind understands instinctively. You do not need to see the event happen. The world carries its traces forward, and the brain, tuned by years of living among these gentle footprints, becomes fluent in reading them. This ability to infer the past, quietly, naturally, is one of the reasons the past feels so real, even though it has already slipped away. Imagine, for a moment, a cup resting on the floor with a scattering of fragments around it. You don't need to see the cup fall to understand that it once stood whole on a table. The broken pieces tell the story. The scattered arrangement is the imprint of an earlier order. Your mind instantly organises the event in the direction that feels natural. Whole, first, broken second. If you reverse the sequence, broken pieces rising subtly, rejoining into a single cup, it would feel not just unusual but impossible, even though nothing in your senses forbids you from imagining it. This sense of impossibility is rooted not only in logic but also in the way the universe behaves. In nature, things tend to move from more organised states to more disorganised ones. The scientific term for this shift is entropy, but you can think of entropy simply as the degree of mixture or the level of disorder. A tidy room has low entropy. A messy room has high entropy. A pristine snowfield with no footprints is low entropy. A snowfield marked with tracks and disturbances has higher entropy. This movement from low to high, from tidy to scattered, is the gentle direction the universe tends to follow. But what matters most for you is not the physics itself, but how your brain has learned to read the world through these physical clues. Each broken cup, each footprint on snow, each wilted flower in a vase carries a small whisper of what came before. These whispers become the structure on which your sense of time is built. The past feels solid because it leaves marks that accumulate and linger. Your brain, in turn, becomes a collector of traces. Every memory you form is its own kind of imprint, a trace held within the changing patterns of your neural network. The recollection you have of reading a beloved book, for instance, is not stored as a picture, but as a constellation of changes in many tiny places in your brain. When you remember it, you're not retrieving a preserved photograph. You're reactivating the ripples left behind by an experience that once passed through you. And just like footprints on the ground, these neural traces reflect a direction. They exist because something already happened. The brain cannot make such marks in anticipation of a future moment. It cannot store the sound of a conversation you have not yet had, or the details of a sunset you have not yet seen. Only the past leaves its imprint. The future remains untouched space. This is why time feels like it moves forward. Because your experience of the world is always shaped by the traces of earlier states. You never see the past directly, but you see its fingerprints in everything. the chipped paint on a windowsill, the warmth lingering in a recently occupied chair, the way a blanket is folded or rumpled. Each of these details points behind you, like tiny arrows marking the direction from which your life has come. Your brain doesn't merely observe these imprints, it interprets them continuously. When you watch a leaf lying on the ground beneath a tree, you implicitly understand that wind or gravity brought it down. When you see petals scattered on the floor, you know they fell from a flower. You don't need a lesson, a formula, or a theory to understand this. The mind has learned, through a lifetime of watching the world, what the ordinary flow of events looks like. And when the world deviates from that flow, your attention sharpens. If you found a leaf rising instead of falling, or broken pieces assembling themselves, you would feel a jolt, not just of surprise, but of disorientation. The story written into nature's traces would be playing in reverse, contradicting the language your mind has been fluent in since childhood. Even memories follow this logic. When you think of a childhood home, you don't imagine it in a random arrangement. You recall it in the way you once lived in it. The kitchen connected to the dining room, the stairs leading up to a bedroom, the hallway carrying echoes of evening routines. These connections are traces too, organised, meaningful, directional. Even the way your memories fade with time mirrors the way physical traces slowly disappear, smoothed away by new experiences, layered over by new stories. If you look closely, you may notice that your entire sense of identity depends on these traces. You know who you are because the past leaves marks that your mind can revisit. Without those marks, your sense of self would dissolve like a reflection in disturbed water. In this way, the past is not simply behind you, it lives within you, in the traces etched gently into your experience. As we drift deeper into this journey, we will soon meet the part of the mind that continuously looks ahead, the predicting brain, and see how it takes these traces of what has been to build expectations of what might be, weaving the future into a direction every bit as compelling as the past. If you pay close attention to the world around you, your footsteps, the sound of your breath, the rustling of fabric as you move, you might notice something curious. Everything feels immediate, as if your awareness is perfectly synchronized with the world. But quietly, beneath the surface of this illusion, your brain is doing something remarkable. It is not simply reacting to the present, it is preparing for what comes next. In fact, your brain is always leaning forward, predicting a small sliver of the future before it arrives. You experience life as if you are standing exactly at the front edge of time, but in truth, your mind is already reaching beyond it. Scientists sometimes describe this as the brain predicting ahead by a very small amount, something like a fraction of a second, though the exact number shifts depending on the situation and the senses involved. But instead of picturing this as a cold measurement, you can imagine it as the mind taking a tiny step ahead, holding out a gentle hand to meet the next moment before it reaches you. When you hear your name called across a room, your mind is already turning toward the sound even before you consciously decide to react. When someone tosses you a set of keys, your hand rises to catch them before you fully register that they're flying toward you. When you listen to music, your mind anticipates the next note, giving the melody its feeling of flow rather than surprise. This predictive quality is not a special skill. It is the natural rhythm of a living brain. Without it, the world would feel as though it were constantly slipping out of place, delayed, unpredictable, overwhelming. Your brain smooths this potential chaos by gently guessing what is about to happen. Whether that guess is as simple as anticipating the next tap of your foot on the floor, or as complex as sensing the emotional shift in a conversation before any words are spoken. You might think prediction sounds like a deliberate act, something you do when planning your day or wondering about a future event. But prediction at the neural level is far softer, more fluid, and nearly invisible. Think of it like the way your breathing adjusts before you climb a flight of stairs, or how your balance shifts even before your foot lands when you step off a curb. Your mind prepares your body before your conscious awareness catches up. This happens across every sense you have. Vision, for instance, relies heavily on prediction. Each time you move your eyes, the world should technically blur or jump, because your view is shifting rapidly, and yet it doesn't. Your brain anticipates the movement and adjusts the incoming information so smoothly that you never notice the chaos that should follow each shift of your gaze. It is as though your awareness is gliding across scenes rather than snapping between them. Hearing follows a similar rhythm. When someone speaks, you understand them not only because you hear the words, but because you are constantly predicting the shape of the sentence that is forming. You expect certain sounds, certain syllables, certain emotional tones. This subtle expectation is why a familiar voice feels comforting, why a familiar language feels fluid, and why unexpected sounds make you jump. They break the prediction your mind had already formed. Even touch works this way. When you reach for something, your brain sends signals not just to move your hand, but to prepare your sense of touch for the expected feel of the object. Smooth, rough, warm, cool. This gentle preparation helps you understand the world with greater ease. If the object feels dramatically different from what you expected, colder, heavier, softer, your attention sharpens immediately. This shift happens so quickly that it feels as if you discovered something before the sensation even arrived. Underlying all of this is a simple principle. The mind would rather anticipate than react. Reaction alone is too slow. Anticipation keeps you grounded, safe, and connected to the world. Without this forward-leaning sense, walking would be awkward, conversation would be filled with strange pauses, and the simplest actions, like turning your head, would feel disjointed. This soft, constant prediction also shapes your sense of time. Because your brain is always stepping slightly into the next moment, the future feels like a direction, like a gentle slope you're always moving toward. The past, filled with memories and footprints, lies behind you. The future, filled with expectations and subtle guesses, lies ahead. You feel this without ever thinking about it. It lives in the rhythm of your steps, in the way your eyes move, in the way your thoughts drift forward. You may notice this predictive quality most clearly in moments when it falters, when you misjudge the distance of a step and stumble slightly, when someone speaks in an unexpected tone and your reply catches in your throat, when you try a new food and the flavour surprises you before you even identify it. These moments reveal how much of your daily life relies on the brain's gentle forecasting. But most of the time, this process is seamless. It gives your experience its coherence, the sense that one moment leads naturally to the next, that the world is not chaotic but gently unfolding. This is a key part of why time feels like it flows forward. The brain does not only carry traces of the past, it continuously reaches toward what comes next. Memory pulls you backward, prediction pulls you forward. Between them, your awareness rests in a smooth middle ground, experiencing time not as a static sequence, but as a river. As this river continues through the mind, it gives rise to the subtle sense that the future is always just about to arrive, a horizon you're gently approaching even in stillness. And as we move further in this exploration, we will begin to see how this anticipation shapes not just the next fraction of a second, but the larger patterns of your life, and why the brain's quiet leaning toward tomorrow strengthens the arrow of time you feel within you. There is a quiet rhythm to daily life that often escapes our attention. You wake up and, without thinking, have a sense of what the next few minutes will bring. You know the general shape of your morning, the cool touch of water on your face, the familiar taste of breakfast, the steps you'll take as you leave the house. Even on days that feel unpredictable, you still carry an outline of what might unfold. This outline is not a rigid plan. It is a gentle expectation formed by countless past routines and subtle patterns your mind has learned over years of living. And it is this constant anticipation that quietly strengthens your sense that time moves forward. If you pause for a moment, you might realize that the mind is rarely still. Even as you listen now, a part of you may be thinking ahead, what you'll do after this, what tasks await you, where your day might lead. This forward lean is so natural that it feels like the default posture of the mind. But beneath this posture lies a remarkable cognitive process, one that shapes how time feels from the inside. The brain, by its nature, prefers to be slightly ahead of the world. It builds tiny models of what is likely to happen next, drawing from memories, familiar patterns, and the soft logic of everyday experience. These models are not detailed predictions, but more like gentle sketches, anticipations that help you navigate each moment with ease. When you walk through a doorway, for example, your mind expects the room beyond even before you step into it. When you reach for a cup, your fingers prepare for its weight before they make contact. When someone begins a sentence, your mind has a quiet sense of how it might end. In familiar situations, this prediction becomes so smooth that you hardly notice it. Consider your daily commute, whether it's a walk down a hallway, a drive through the city, or a short ride in an elevator. The path feels shorter each time because your brain doesn't need to absorb every detail. Instead, it fills in the journey using memories of past commutes, allowing time to slip by more quickly. The future, in these moments, feels like something already partly known, like a soft echo of the steps you've taken before. But what happens when something unexpected disrupts this rhythm? Imagine turning a corner and encountering something out of place, a street blocked off, a loud noise, a face you didn't expect to see. In those moments, time seems to stretch. You feel more alert, more present. Your awareness sharpens, as though the world has suddenly slowed to let you catch up. This stretching is a sign that your mind's gentle forecast was interrupted, forcing it to gather fresh information instead of relying on memory. The break in prediction changes the flow of time from your perspective, making a single moment feel broader, deeper, or heavier. This interplay between routine and surprise reveals something profound. The way you feel time depends not only on what is happening, but also on what you expected would happen. A predictable moment passes quickly. An unexpected moment widens. A moment of intense emotion, joy, fear, wonder, can break through your usual forecast and imprint itself deeply. Think of a time when you received sudden news or witnessed something breathtaking. For a brief instant, you stepped outside the smooth river of your expectations, and everything felt brighter, sharper, and strangely expanded. This forward-leaning quality of the mind shapes the arrow of time just as much as memory does. If memory binds your past together, anticipation stretches your awareness into the future. And between these two movements, one pulling from behind, the other reaching ahead, you feel yourself carried along a path. The sense that the next moment is coming is part of what gives time its direction. Without this expectation, the future would feel less like a destination and more like a blank void. But the mind refuses to leave the future empty. It fills the space ahead with possibilities. Even small tasks reveal this tendency. When you pick up a book, your mind imagines the next page. When you cook a meal, you anticipate the taste. When you start a conversation, you sense where it might drift. Each of these tiny forecasts pulls you forward. Even a mundane chore, like folding laundry or washing dishes, contains a quiet awareness of what comes next. The next shirt, the next plate, the next step. The emotional side of anticipation deepens this effect. Looking forward to something, a visit from a friend, a holiday, a moment of rest, stretches your sense of time toward that future event. You carry the anticipation with you, like a soft thread tied to what lies ahead. On the other hand, when you dread something, the thread pulls with a different tension, creating a feeling that time is speeding toward an unwelcome moment. Both forms of anticipation give the future shape, weight, and direction. And so, even in moments of stillness, you're not entirely still. The mind continues to lean gently toward what might come next. This leaning creates a sense of momentum, like the natural pull of a hill you're walking down. You don't need to force yourself forward. The shape of the hill does the work. In the same way, your expectations form a gentle slope that guides your movement through time. If you were to remove anticipation entirely, if you could somehow silence the mind's quiet guesses, the flow of time would change drastically. You might experience the world moment by moment with a purity that feels almost unreal, but you would also feel unmoored, without a sense of direction. The future would lose its orientation, and with it, much of the meaning we attach to it. The arrow of time, from your perspective, would weaken. But the mind does not allow that. It continues to build small bridges from the present to the near future, again and again, without rest. This endless creation of expectation reinforces your sense that time moves forward, that tomorrow lies ahead of you as surely as yesterday lies behind. As we move onward, we'll step into the delicate space where these predictions meet the emotional currents of life, and how together they shape your experience of time in ways that feel both deeply personal and universally human. There are days when time glides so quickly that evening seems to arrive only a few breaths after morning, and then there are days when a single hour feels strangely stretched, as if the clock were moving through syrup instead of air. You may have wondered why time feels so different depending on the situation, even though the hands on a clock never change their steady rhythm. The answer lies not in the passing of minutes, but in the shifting patterns of your attention, your emotions, and the quiet predictions your mind makes as you move through the world. Imagine walking along a familiar street you have taken hundreds of times before. Your feet follow the same path, the same sequence of small steps. The buildings carry no surprises, the sounds blend into a comfortable background, and the route asks nothing new of you. In these moments, your mind can move ahead of your body with ease. It doesn't need to linger on every detail. Instead, it drifts gently, floating on thought. And when your mind is not anchored to the immediate moment, time tends to slip by unnoticed. Before you realize it, you're already at your destination, with a faint impression that the world sped up around you. Now, imagine stepping into an unfamiliar place, a city you've never visited, or a path you've never walked. Suddenly your senses awaken. You take in the shapes of buildings, the faces of strangers, the patterns of sound, the scent of foods you don't quite recognize. Every detail is new, and your mind pays attention with a kind of bright curiosity. Even the shadows and reflections feel meaningful, pulling your awareness in subtle directions. And because your attention is full and present, each moment expands. A short walk feels long, not because more time has passed, but because you are absorbing more of it. This contrast reveals something gentle, yet powerful. Your sense of time is not determined by the ticking of seconds, but by the density of experience within them. When the mind predicts easily, when events unfold as expected, time feels thin and light. When the mind cannot predict, when it must gather new details, time feels thick and textured. You can see this most clearly in moments of fear or danger. Think of a time when you nearly slipped, or almost dropped something valuable, or braked suddenly while driving. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to slow around you. Details that would normally flash past became strangely vivid. The angle of a falling object, the exact sound of your breath, the subtle shift of your body in space. Your mind steps into a heightened state, gathering information quickly, updating predictions faster than usual. It's as if the world widens to make room for everything you need to respond. The clock does not slow, but your perception does. The same thing happens in moments of wonder. Consider watching fireworks for the first time or seeing a sweeping landscape that steals your breath. The spark of amazement sharpens your senses. You take in more colour, more detail, more emotion. The moment grows. Children experience this all the time, which is why their days feel full and long. The world is still fresh to them, filled with discoveries, so their minds absorb it with a kind of gentle intensity. And then, as people get older, years begin to pass more quickly. Not because the years truly shrink, but because the number of first-time experiences decreases. Routines become more stable, days blend together. The mind predicts more than it needs to observe, leaving fewer moments of surprise to expand time. This is why adults often look back on childhood and feel that those early years were much longer, more expansive, wrapped in a kind of slow magic. Emotion too shapes time's texture. A joyful moment can vanish quickly because you are fully immersed in its warmth, not pausing to measure it. Meanwhile, a moment of sadness may feel drawn out because you notice every small shift, every breath, every thought. Happiness lightens time, grief thickens it, hope stretches it toward the horizon. Anxiety pulls it forward too fast, making the future feel too close, too soon. Even simple states of mind can shape your internal clock. When you are bored, time feels sluggish because your attention has nowhere to rest. When you are deeply absorbed, reading a novel, working on a project, listening to music you love, time unravels without you noticing. Hours slip by wrapped in a kind of peaceful fog, as though the world has temporarily paused its demands. Your brain never measures time directly. There is no internal stopwatch ticking away inside your mind. Instead, it relies on patterns, expectations, memories, sensory changes, emotional depth. The more information your brain processes in a moment, the longer that moment feels. The fewer details it needs to handle, the shorter it feels. And so, when time feels fast, it is often because the mind has predicted the moment easily. When time feels slow, the mind is fully present, gathering more than it expected. When time feels surreal, neither fast nor slow, but strangely suspended, it is often because your attention and your emotions are balanced in a delicate way, giving the moment a clarity that sets it apart from the rest. This understanding brings us closer to realizing that the arrow of time is not only something the universe creates, it is also something your mind shapes through its rhythms of prediction and attention. As we move onwards in this journey, we'll begin to see how these inner rhythms connect to the deeper rules of the physical world, how the universe itself sets the stage on which the mind constructs its flowing experience of time. If you hold a deck of cards in your hands and take a moment to arrange them carefully, starting from the ace and rising all the way to the king, you end up with something neat, ordered and satisfying. Every card has its place, every suit is aligned. Now imagine shuffling that deck. With each riffle and each cut, the arrangement becomes a little more tangled, a little more mixed. You could spend minutes or hours shuffling, and the cards would wander through countless possible patterns, but there is something you almost certainly would not see. The deck, entirely by chance, returning to its perfect, ordered sequence. Nothing in the rules of the cards forbids it, but it is so unlikely that, for all practical purposes, it never happens. In a quiet way, this is how the universe behaves. It does not forbid order. It simply slips, step by step, toward more and more ways of being disordered. This gentle slide is what physicists call entropy increasing, but you can think of it as the natural tendency for things to spread out, to mix, to scatter. You can see this spreading everywhere if you look with soft attention. When you pour a splash of milk into tea, the two liquids do not stay separate. The milk swirls, stretches, and then dissolves into the darker liquid until the cup holds a single, blended colour. You never see the mixture suddenly collapse back into pure tea with a perfect drop of milk sitting on top. When a candle burns, wax melts, and soft light fills the room, and the warmth moves outward into the air. The heat does not suddenly leap back into the candle, restoring the wick and unused wax. Broken cups do not reassemble. Smoke does not gather back into a neat column and slip into the match that started it. In each case, what changes is not some mystical force but the number of possible arrangements. There are many more ways for milk and tea to be mixed than to stay perfectly separate. There are many more ways for heat to be spread out in the air than to remain tightly packed near the candle. The universe does not prefer decay in a moral sense. It simply drifts toward the most likely states, the ones that can be realized in the greatest number of tiny configurations. If you like, you can imagine the universe as a vast library of possible arrangements. Neat, highly ordered situations, cards in perfect sequence, a room where every object is exactly aligned, occupy only a few shelves in this enormous collection. Messier, more mixed situations fill almost every shelf. Whenever things are allowed to change freely, they tend to wander away from the rare, orderly corners of the library and into the endless aisles of disorder. That slow wandering is the physical arrow of time. This arrow exists whether or not anyone is watching. Long before there were eyes to see or minds to think, stars were igniting and cooling, gas clouds were collapsing, and energy was spreading into the cold dark. The universe began, for reasons we still do not fully understand, in a state of astonishingly low entropy, a kind of cosmic neatness. Galaxies, stars, planets, and eventually living beings grew out of this special beginning as the universe moved toward higher entropy, toward more scattered and mixed arrangements of matter and energy. Even without thinking about equations or symbols, you can feel the truth of this direction in ordinary life. You can easily turn a neat room into a messy one just by living in it, leaving books open, clothes draped, cups placed on different surfaces. But to reverse the process and restore perfect order requires deliberate effort. You can scramble an egg with a quick motion of the wrist. You cannot, no matter how patient you are, coax the cooked egg back into its original form inside the shell. The ease of going one way, and the difficulty or impossibility of going the other, is the quiet signature of entropy. What makes this especially interesting for us is that our brains are part of the same universe. Each thought you have, each memory you lay down, each heartbeat and breath involves energy moving and spreading in tiny ways. Your mind does not float above these rules, it is woven from them. Every neuron that fires, every subtle chemical change, every shift in the pattern of activity in your brain participates in this same tendency towards spreading and mixing. Yet even as entropy pushes the physical world in one direction, your mind experiences that push as flow. You do not think, entropy increased a little more today. You think, another day has passed. The cooling of tea, the fading of a footprint, the growth of a tree ring, the wear on a favourite item of clothing, the wrinkles that slowly appear on a familiar face. All are manifestations of energy spreading out, of change moving in one principal direction. You interpret these signs as time advancing. The crucial point is that the physical arrow, the increase of entropy, does not depend on perception. If every conscious being vanished tomorrow, cups would still break more easily than they would mend. Heat would still flow from warmer regions to colder ones. Structures would still tend, over long stretches, to crumble rather than spontaneously rebuild. The direction would remain, but for us that direction becomes more than a rule of nature. It becomes the backdrop against which every experience is painted. When you remember your past, what you are really remembering are the traces left by previous, more ordered states. A younger version of yourself, a house less worn by time, relationships at earlier stages of unfolding. When you imagine the future, you imagine states that have not yet left any trace. They are possibilities, not imprints. The physical arrow of time determines where traces can exist, always in the direction of what has already happened. Your mind, reading these traces, constructs the feeling that time has a front and a back. In this way, the universe is one-way street and your inner sense of flow are deeply entwined. The world's tendency to move from order to disorder quietly shapes every mark the past leaves on the present, and your brain, exquisitely tuned to those marks, weaves them into the story you call your life. As we continue, we'll bring these threads closer together, looking at how the same irreversible processes that drive entropy also make memory possible, and why that means your brain is forever bound to the past, never to the future. If you imagine standing in a quiet field after fresh snowfall, you might notice how the untouched surface of the snow seems to invite footprints. Each step you take leaves a clear imprint, shallow and distinct if you walk gently, deeper and sharper if you press your weight down. As you continue walking, the path forms behind you, marking where you've been. But no matter how carefully you look ahead, the snow in front of you remains smooth and unmarked. It gives no hint of the steps you have not yet taken. This simple image captures something profound about the mind. Memories leave traces behind you, but the future cannot leave traces ahead. Your brain, in its own delicate way, works much like this snowy field. Every moment you live presses into the mind, forming small physical imprints, changes in neural pathways, the strengthening or weakening of connections, tiny shifts in the patterns of activity that shape who you are. These changes are not grand or dramatic, they are subtle, almost invisible. But together, they create the landscape of your memories. They form the footprints of your past. When you remember something, perhaps the scent of a room you loved, or the nervous flutter of your first day at work, you're not calling up a perfect recording. Instead, you're reawakening the traces left behind by that moment. Your mind stirs the footprints, warming them back into structure and sensation. This ability to reactivate the past is what gives memory its vividness, its emotional depth. And the reason it works at all is because the past has left these traces within you. The future, however, cannot do this. It cannot leave marks because it has not yet happened. Your brain cannot physically change in response to a moment that has not existed. There is no neural pathway shaped by a conversation you have not yet had, no strengthened connection representing a laugh you have not yet shared. The mind cannot carve impressions in advance. It can only project, imagine, or anticipate. But these projections contain no physical imprint. They are like footsteps drawn lightly in the air, rather than pressed firmly into the snow. To understand why this is so fundamental, consider what memory really entails. Forming a memory requires energy. Your brain must change itself, rearranging microscopic structures, adjusting tiny interactions, creating patterns that can later be revived. Each of these changes involves tiny flows of energy and matter. Even though you cannot feel them happening, they are as physical as waves on a shore or leaves shifting in the wind, and like all physical processes, they follow the natural direction of the universe, from order toward greater disorder. You can think of this gently. Every new memory is like stirring a pool of water. The ripples spread outward, never inward. They move from concentration to dispersion. The act of remembering, like the act of stirring, contributes to the spreading. It requires energy and leaves behind a little more mixing in the system. These processes cannot run in reverse, not because they break a law, but because they are part of a world where forward is simply the direction in which change is easiest. This is why memory is tied to the past. The brain cannot form the trace of something before it happens, because the energy needed to reshape the brain can only be triggered by real events, real stimuli, real experiences. You cannot form the memory of a sunset you will see tomorrow. When tomorrow arrives, the sunset may be breathtaking, and your mind will shape itself anew in response to it. But before that moment, there is nothing to respond to. the trace does not yet exist. And this is also why predictions, no matter how vivid or emotionally powerful, do not feel like memories. You might imagine a conversation with someone you miss, and your mind might paint their voice, their gestures, their warmth with remarkable clarity. But the image will still feel soft, as if you are holding a cloud rather than a stone. Predictions lack the grounding of physical traces. They are shaped not by what has happened, but by what could happen. They hover in possibility rather than resting in certainty. Because the brain cannot encode the future, the timeline of your life naturally falls into a single direction. The past grows richer as more traces accumulate. The present shapes new ones. The future remains open, blank like fresh snow. And this asymmetry, the way footprints appear only behind you, creates the psychological arrow of time. It makes you feel that you're moving forward because your memories form a long trail stretching behind, anchoring you to a beginning that steadily grows more distant. This arrow aligns perfectly with the physical arrow of time, the tendency for energy to spread, for order to loosen, for events to leave marks that cannot be undone without extraordinary effort. You never see a memory suddenly vanish backward, becoming unremembered in a neat reverse sequence. Memories fade, yes, but they do not reverse. They dim slowly, like footprints softening under falling snow, but they never move backward in time. When you look around at the world, you see the same alignment. A melted candle cannot return to its original untouched state. A wilted flower cannot become fresh again by rearranging molecules in reverse. These processes carry the same directionality as memory. The universe and the mind share the same flow, not by coincidence, but because the mind is made of the same matter and bound by the same rules. The physical arrow and the psychological arrow do not just coexist, they reinforce each other. The world leaves marks of what came before, and your brain reads those marks, using them to build its sense of time. The brain then adds its own traces, memories, patterns, stories, on top of the world's traces. The result is a layered, deeply interconnected sense of time's direction, one that feels entirely natural because it is woven from both the universe's rules and your own experiences. As we move forward, we'll explore how this merging of physics and perception shapes the emotional meaning of time, how endings and beginnings, aging and change, all reflect the same one-way flow that holds the universe together and keeps your inner world in motion. If you sit quietly and let your thoughts drift, you might notice that life often feels like a story made of countless small chapters, some bright, some dim, all connected by a thread you can't quite see but constantly feel. The gentle passing of seasons, the way familiar faces slowly change, the quiet shift from morning to evening, all of it creates an impression of motion that seems to run through everything, from the turning of the earth to the subtle rearrangements within your own heart. This impression is not just poetic, it reflects something woven into the structure of the universe itself. The same one-way flow that shapes the stars also shapes the way you understand your own existence. Think of the end of a long day, the faint ache in your shoulders, the warmth of your body settling into rest, the soft blur of memories that drift into view. These sensations carry a direction. They reflect what has happened, the energy you've used, the choices you've made. The day doesn't simply vanish when it's over, it becomes part of the slowly widening river behind you. This feeling of accumulation mirrors the way entropy grows in the physical world. Just as the universe tends to spread energy outward, your experiences spread through your mind, leaving traces that deepen and soften over time. The same principle appears in the way we age. A newborn enters the world with fresh skin, new cells, and little imprint of time. But as years pass, tiny changes accumulate. Sunlight touches the skin again and again, leaving faint marks. Bones strengthen, then gradually soften. The body breathes millions of breaths, each one exchanging energy with the world. These biological changes follow the same directionality as the melting of ice or the cooling of warm water. They unfold in ways that cannot simply reverse themselves. You cannot unfurl the wrinkles of time any more than you can unmix the milk from a cup of tea. And yet, the experience of aging is not just physical. There is an emotional shape to it, an awareness that you are moving through life, not circling it. You might look at old photographs and feel the distance between your present self and the person smiling back at you. There's recognition, but also a sense of difference, a quiet realization that time has carried you forward. This emotional resonance is part of the psychological arrow of time. It belongs to the mind, not the universe, and yet, remarkably, it mirrors the universe's own one-way flow. Every ending you've lived through follows the same pattern. When a chapter of your life closes, a job change, the end of a school year, the passing of a loved one, you feel the direction of time with particular clarity. Endings mark boundaries. They remind you that life moves forward, that the past cannot be re-entered, that the pages already turned cannot be returned to their unwritten state. These moments are difficult precisely because they reveal the irreversible nature of existence. But they also highlight the beauty of new beginnings, the way a fresh chapter waits quietly on the other side of each transition. In nature, this irreversibility appears everywhere. Leaves fall and crumble into soil. Snow melts into water. Rivers carve deeper valleys. Mountains erode grain by grain. None of these processes go backward, not because some cosmic rule prohibits it, but because going forward is simply the path of least resistance, the direction where countless possibilities lie. It is far easier for leaves to scatter on the ground than to gather themselves back onto branches. It is far easier for snow to melt than to reassemble into its original patterns. And in your own life, it is far easier to create memories than to erase them. Interestingly, humans internalize this cosmic irreversibility so deeply that it shapes our emotional landscape. The feeling of nostalgia, for instance, is rooted in the recognition that a moment once lived cannot be reclaimed. The beauty of a memory is tied not just to the moment itself, but to the fact that it belongs firmly to the past. It is a soft ache created by time's one-way motion. Similarly, the sweetness of anticipation comes from the awareness that the future has not yet unfolded, that it waits ahead like a book with pages still crisp and untouched. The interplay between these emotional states, nostalgia for what has been, hope for what will be, creates a kind of internal gravity that keeps your mind oriented in the same direction as the universe. You move through life as though you are walking along a gently curving path, with the past behind you and the future in front, even though you cannot see either clearly. This orientation is so natural that you rarely question it. Even in small, ordinary moments, the arrow of time shows itself in the way you perceive change. Think of the way light fades in a room as evening falls. At first, the shift is barely noticeable. Then the shadows deepen, the colours soften, and the room takes on a quiet stillness. You recognise the direction of this change instinctively. You know dusk is approaching because you've seen countless days move from brightness to dimness. If the process were reversed, if darkness gradually lifted into midday glow without a sunrise, it would feel profoundly wrong. Your mind has absorbed the patterns of the world and expects them to move forward, always forward. Even memories fade in ways that reflect this flow. They soften at the edges. Their colours blur. Their outlines become less distinct. They don't sharpen over time. They don't gather new detail unless you revisit them. Instead, they gradually drift into the misty background of your inner world, shaped by the same tendency toward mixing and spreading that governs the physical universe. This soft fading is not a flaw in the mind. It is part of its natural rhythm. It keeps you oriented toward what comes next, rather than what has already come before. And yet, even as the universe gently pushes everything along its one-way path, your mind does something extraordinary. It creates meaning out of the flow. It finds stories within the changes. It gathers the irreversible moments, the endings, the beginnings, the shifts, and weaves them into an understanding of who you are. In this sense, the arrow of time is not only a physical principle, it is also an emotional one, a psychological one, a narrative one. It is the framework within which life unfolds. As we move toward the next part of our journey, we'll step into the space where this outer world and inner world meet fully, where consciousness itself creates a personal version of time, one that flows even when the surrounding world is still, one that turns the passing of moments into the unfolding of a life. If you've ever found yourself drifting during a quiet moment, perhaps while washing dishes, or gazing out a window, or lying in bed just before sleep, you may have noticed that your mind begins to wander on its own. Thoughts drift from one memory to another, leap gently toward the future, and then circle back to the present in a slow, looping dance. This wandering might seem aimless, but beneath it lies one of the most remarkable features of the human brain, a built-in storyteller that never truly rests. It is this storyteller that weaves your memories and your expectations into the sense of a continuous self moving through time. Scientists sometimes refer to this storyteller as the default mode network, a term that sounds far more mechanical than the experience it describes. Instead of imagining circuitry or complicated diagrams, you can imagine it as a small lantern glowing gently inside your mind, lighting up whenever your thoughts turn inward. It is active when you are remembering, when you're imagining, when you're daydreaming, and even when you simply let your awareness drift without effort. It is the quiet narrator that whispers, "This is who you are. This is where you've been. This is where you might be going." You feel this narrator most clearly in moments when your mind is free from tasks. Picture yourself in the shower, warm steam drifting around you. Your hands move almost automatically, shampooing, rinsing, reaching for a towel, and in that small pocket of routine your mind begins to roam. Perhaps it revisits a conversation from yesterday. Perhaps it imagines a conversation you have not yet had. Perhaps it reconstructs a childhood memory with surprising clarity, or sketches an idea for something you hope to do tomorrow. None of these mental shifts require effort. They arise naturally, as if your mind were sifting gently through its own library. The beauty of this inner storyteller is that it does not treat past and future as separate territories. Instead, it moves between them using the same pathways. When you remember a moment from years ago, the warmth of an old friend's laughter, the glow of afternoon sunlight in a room you no longer live in, your mind uses the same neural structures that it uses to imagine tomorrow. This overlap means that memory and imagination are not distant cousins. They are siblings, sharing the same home. Your brain looks backward and forward using the same tools, fragments of experience, threads of emotion, and patterns woven from countless moments. This is why imagining the future can feel strangely similar to remembering the past. Both involve reconstructing scenes from scratch. Both ask your brain to gather details, colours, textures, sounds from its internal stores. Both give you a faint sense of presence, even though one belongs firmly to memory while the other floats in possibility. And both make time feel like something you can step into, whether you're recalling a moment that shaped you or visualising a moment that hasn't yet taken form. What makes this especially meaningful is how the inner storyteller creates a sense of continuity. Without it, your life would feel like a series of disconnected moments, each isolated from the next. But because this narrator links memories and predictions, you feel as though you're travelling along a thread that stretches behind you and ahead of you. The thread is not perfectly smooth. Some memories glow more brightly than others. Some predictions tug more strongly at your attention. But together, they create a path that feels like your path. This path is reinforced each time your mind drifts. While standing in a grocery store line, you might replay something that happened earlier in the day or think about how you will spend your evening. While listening to music, you may be pulled toward memories the melody evokes, or into the vision of a future moment you hope to experience. These drifting thoughts seem small, but their accumulation builds the sense that you are a single person moving through time, not a series of separate selves flickering in and out of existence. Even simple activities reveal the work of this storyteller. When you walk home on a familiar evening, your mind may wander through scenes of your day, replaying conversations or imagining how they might unfold differently next time. When you lie in bed before sleep, you may move through past and future with surprising fluidity, recalling moments from childhood, envisioning tomorrow's tasks, wondering about paths not taken. These quiet wanderings are the mind weaving your narrative in real time. It is important to notice that this continuity is not built from logic alone. Emotion plays a subtle but powerful role. A memory you cherish or regret pulls more strongly on your attention. A hope or fear about the future brightens or darkens your imagined scenes. The inner storyteller does not simply narrate events, it colours them, shapes them, sometimes softens them. It gives your personal timeline its emotional texture. Because of this inner narrative, the flow of time feels not only physical but personal. You feel yourself growing, not just because your body ages, but because your thoughts, memories and hopes change in ways that the storyteller binds together. It turns the irreversible changes of the world around you into a coherent sense of becoming. You're no longer the child you once were, and you're not yet the person you will be, but your mind gently bridges those gaps. This quiet narrator also explains why your sense of time can persist even in stillness. When you sit alone in a silent room, nothing outside you may be changing, yet your thoughts continue to move. You revisit the past, anticipate the future, and feel yourself carried along by an invisible current. This current is not created by clocks or calendars. It is created by the inner storyteller, gently turning your experiences into a flowing narrative. As we drift onward, we will step into the emotional realm of this flow, how feelings shape your perception of time's passage, and why different emotional states can make time expand, contract, or stand strangely still. Through this lens, the arrow of time becomes not just something the universe gives you, but something your heart and mind shape together. If you think back on your life, certain moments may float immediately to the surface, moments filled with strong emotion, a sudden joy, a deep sorrow, a quiet triumph, a painful regret. What these moments share is not just their emotional weight, but the way they distort your sense of time. Some seem to expand, stretching a single heartbeat into something almost cinematic. Others collapse into a flash that feels impossibly brief. This shaping of time is not an illusion or a trick. It is the mind revealing one of its softest truths. Emotion is not just something you feel. It is something that colours the flow of time itself. You may remember a moment when time seemed to slow, perhaps in a split second of fear, your foot slipping on wet ground, a car stopping suddenly, a fragile object falling from your hands. In that instant, everything sharpened. Sound, sight, motion. They all became more vivid, as if the world paused to give your mind more room to process what was happening. This slowing is not caused by the world itself, but by your attention stretching the moment, gathering every detail to protect you. Emotion intensifies awareness, and awareness thickens time. At the other end of the spectrum, joy often shortens time. Think of a reunion with an old friend, a day filled with laughter, or a moment when you are deeply immersed in something you love. Hours pass, yet feel like minutes. When your heart is full, the mind doesn't bother measuring time closely. It relaxes its grip, letting the moment roll along like a gentle breeze. Later you may look back and marvel at how quickly it seemed to go by. Regret too shapes time in its own way. A mistake from years ago may still feel close, while joyful events from the same period seem to fade more easily. Regret concentrates your attention backward, narrowing your focus to a single memory, causing time around it to contract. The moment becomes disproportionately heavy, its emotional weight pressing it closer to your awareness than its age would suggest. Hope, on the other hand, stretches time forward. You may notice that waiting for something you deeply desire, a message, an arrival, a result, can make each passing minute feel elongated. The future plays tug-of-war with your present, and anticipation magnifies the space between now and the moment you long for. You stand at the edge of what has not yet happened, feeling time open wide in front of you. Anxiety behaves differently. It compresses the future, making it rush toward you with a sense of inevitability. When you worry intensely, it feels as though the next moment is arriving too fast, carrying possibilities you may not be ready to face. The mind, in a state of fear, pulls the future closer, breathing urgency into moments that haven't yet taken place. What becomes clear is that emotion does not simply accompany time, it sculpts it. Two people can experience the same hour and come away with entirely different impressions. One may feel the hour fly, the other may feel it drag. The difference lies not in the clock, but in the inner landscape of the mind. Consider how music affects your perception of time. A sorrowful melody stretches moments, each note lingering with emotion. A lively rhythm does the opposite, pulling you forward, making time feel lighter. Your emotional state interacts with sound, memory, and attention, weaving these elements into your perception of the passage of time. Even subtle moods shape time. A quiet sadness can make days feel long, as though the world is moving through a thicker air. A sense of peace can make them glide. When you are restless, the minute hand seems reluctant to move. When you are content, it turns effortlessly. This emotional shaping is part of the reason why your memories of time are uneven. Some years feel full and expansive in hindsight, while others feel thin and difficult to grasp. Periods of intense emotion tend to leave deeper traces. They create more vivid footprints in the mind, making those stretches of your personal timeline feel denser. Meanwhile, periods of routine, stability, or emotional neutrality can blend together, giving the impression that time has slipped away more quickly than expected. What's remarkable is that these emotional distortions of time are not merely reflections of your inner world. They shape it. The way you feel time affects how you make decisions, how you form memories, and how you imagine the future. A moment that feels expansive becomes easier to recall. A moment that feels fleeting may slip into the background. A moment that feels suspended, neither fast nor slow, often becomes one of the most memorable of all. Emotions also influence how you connect with others. Shared joy can make time feel brief but meaningful. Shared grief can make time feel heavy and significant. Even a simple conversation can stretch or shrink depending on the emotional resonance between you and the other person. A deep talk can feel timeless. An awkward exchange can feel painfully slow. Through all these experiences, you may begin to sense that your perception of time is deeply personal, almost like a fabric that stretches, contracts, or softens based on the emotional threads woven through it. This fabric is not separate from the brain's predictive or mnemonic processes, it is interwoven with them. Emotion sharpens certain moments and softens others, affecting how memories form and how expectations are shaped. When you feel deeply, you live deeply. And when you live deeply, time becomes textured. As we move forward, we'll explore moments when this emotional timekeeping breaks down entirely, when injury or trauma or illness severs the thread of continuity, causing time to lose its structure. Through these difficult examples, we'll see just how essential memory and emotion are in maintaining the arrow of time within the human mind. There is a quiet, almost invisible assumption woven through your experience of living. The belief that you are the same person today as you were yesterday, and that you will still be recognizably yourself tomorrow. This sense of continuity, of being carried forward along a thread that stretches across your life, is so fundamental that it feels like breathing. You do not need to decide to feel it. It simply happens. But for some people, through illness, trauma, or injury, this thread weakens or snaps, revealing just how delicate the arrow of time becomes when the brain can no longer hold the past together or extend itself into the future. Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that yesterday has gone missing. Not faded, not blurred, but fully absent, as if someone had gently lifted the last chapter of your life and carried it away. You might still recognize familiar objects. You might know your own name. But the narrative thread leading up to the present moment would be gone. This is what some forms of amnesia feel like. Not a loss of knowledge, but a loss of the story that gives life its direction. In certain cases, people with memory loss can no longer recall events from moments, hours, or years before. What surprises many scientists is that the inability to remember the past is often paired with another difficulty: the inability to imagine the future. A person who cannot recall yesterday often cannot picture tomorrow either. When they try to think about what might happen later in the day or next week, their mind meets a blank space, as smooth and empty as a snowy field untouched by footprints. This pairing reveals something profound. The same neural systems that allow you to revisit the past are also the ones that allow you to imagine the future. Without memory, the ability to weave possible futures dissolves. The arrow of time within the mind collapses. Instead of feeling drawn forward, the person becomes suspended in the present, unable to step confidently into what comes next. You can picture this collapse gently. Think of a rope stretched across a riverbank, allowing you to walk hand over hand from one side to the other. The part of the rope behind you keeps you steady. The part ahead of you guides your movement forward. But if the rope frays in the middle, if the section behind you is cut, you cannot move ahead. You're left holding only the piece in your hands, unable to progress, unable to retreat. Memory is that rope, and when it breaks, the future drifts out of reach. This disconnection also affects identity. A person with severe memory loss may look in the mirror and recognize their reflection on a basic level. The shape of a face, the color of hair, but the reflection feels detached from the story of who they are. Without a past, the mind struggles to maintain a sense of self. Biologically, they are present. Psychologically, they are untethered. They experience time not as a flowing river, but as a series of still pools, each disconnected from the last. Trauma can create similar disruptions, though in more complex ways. Traumatic memories often become trapped in the mind, replaying with a vividness that feels almost physical. Instead of fading gently into the background like ordinary memories, trauma can lodge itself deep within the brain's emotional centers. For some people, the past refuses to retreat. It pushes itself into the present over and over, creating the sense that time has stopped or looped. The arrow of time becomes twisted. Rather than moving steadily forward, it bends back on itself, trapping the person in a cycle they cannot escape. On the other side of trauma lies another phenomenon: emotional numbing or dissociation. In these states, people may move through their days feeling strangely disconnected, as though watching their life unfold from a distance. Moments lose their weight. Memories fail to anchor. The future feels indistinct. Time becomes flat, almost flavorless. A sequence of moments without depth or direction. The arrow weakens, not because the world stops moving, but because the mind stops weaving. Even neurological conditions such as dementia reveal the fragility of time's arrow. Early on, short-term memory begins to fade. Later, long-term memories begin to erode as well. With each missing piece, the timeline of a person's life becomes harder to navigate. At first, the future becomes foggy, then the past unravels. Eventually, the person may live almost entirely in the present, unable to trace their roots or foresee their path. Time becomes a circle of repeating experiences, not a line that stretches outward. These conditions are heartbreaking, but they illuminate a quiet truth. The arrow of time as you experience it, your sense of moving from who you were to who you are becoming, is something your brain actively maintains. It is not simply given. It must be constructed moment by moment through the interplay of memory, imagination, and emotion. This reveals something even deeper about everyday life. The continuity you feel is fragile because it depends on delicate processes within the brain, processes that are invisible when they work well, but deeply disruptive when they falter. The ability to remember yesterday and imagine tomorrow is not a simple luxury. It is a fundamental structure of the mind, one that holds your identity together and moves you forward through your own story. And yet, this fragility also reveals beauty. It shows that the arrow of time is not just a rule of physics, but a gift of consciousness. It is something you create with each memory you form, each hope you carry, each emotion that tinges your experience with colour. When it works smoothly, it makes life feel like a continuous evolving journey. When it falters, the full importance of that continuity becomes clear. As we gently transition into the next part of our exploration, we'll look at how the mind and the universe working together shape the very experience of flowing through time, and how your personal arrow of time is strengthened by the delicate alignment between what the cosmos does and what your consciousness creates. If you could float above your life for a moment, like a quiet observer watching from a gentle height, you might see something delicate at work. Two different forces shaping your experience of time, moving together like dancers who do not speak yet somehow follow the same rhythm. One dancer is the universe itself, guided by the soft rule that things tend to spread out, mix and drift from order toward disorder. The other dancer is your mind, weaving memories of what has already happened and forming predictions about what might come next. The steps they take are different, but when they move together, you feel time as a single flowing direction. You feel the arrow. The physical arrow of time is older than stars. Long before Earth formed, before atoms gathered into planets, the universe began in a state of low disorder, a kind of cosmic neatness. From that unusual beginning, everything has been slowly unfolding, spreading, cooling, mixing. You see this in melting ice, in fading echoes, in the gentle collapse of heat into the surrounding air. The universe does not rewind these processes because they would require an extraordinary, almost impossible rearranging of countless tiny pieces. Instead, the natural direction is forward, but you do not experience time by watching entropy rise like a cosmic tide. You feel time because your mind quietly aligns itself with that tide. Memory forms behind you as surely as footprints solidify your steps. The future remains open, like untouched ground ahead. This alignment, the world moving one way, your mind interpreting it the same way, is what makes time feel continuous, dependable, and real. To understand this collaboration more gently, imagine a riverbed and a stream. The riverbed, carved by ancient forces, guides the flow of water. It sets the shape, the direction, the boundaries. That riverbed is the universe's arrow, the path carved by entropy. But the stream, the living water that rushes across it, is your mind. It flows, swirls, carries leaves, reflects sunlight, deepens in some places, grows calm in others. It is always moving, always reinterpreting the path beneath it. Without the riverbed, the stream would spill everywhere, directionless. Without the stream, the riverbed would be dry and silent. Together they create the experience of a flowing river. In the same way, physics and consciousness create the experience of flowing time. You can see this collaboration in ordinary life. Consider a candle burning on a table. The wax melts, the flame flickers, the scent fills the air. These are physical processes, born from energy spreading out. But your mind reads them differently. You see the candle as marking a moment, as creating an atmosphere, an ending to the day. or a beginning to a warm conversation. The physics behind the flickering flame and the emotion beneath your gaze blend into a single sense of time passing. Think, too, of a photograph of your younger self. The image has not changed. The ink on the paper is the same as the day it was printed. What has changed is you, your memories, your experiences, the quiet layers added to your life since the moment the photo was taken. The universe gives the photo its physical permanence. Your mind gives it emotional distance, a sense of then contrasted with now. Without both halves, the sensation of time stretching back toward that younger version of yourself would not exist. Even the seasons show this partnership. The tilt of the earth, the shifting path of sunlight, the cycles of warmth and cold, all are governed by cosmic mechanics. But the feeling of time moving through the year, the sense of transitioning from one chapter to another, comes from within you. A falling leaf means autumn only because you have memories of autumns past. A lengthening shadow at evening signals the slowing of the day because you have lived through countless evenings, each leaving traces your mind gently layers atop one another. The collaboration becomes especially clear when you reflect on how differently time can feel for different people. For a child, a summer seems endless, full of possibilities and discoveries. For an adult, that same span may feel brief, even fragile. Physically, the season lasts the same number of days for both, but emotionally and cognitively, it stretches or contracts depending on memories, novelty, and expectations. The universe provides the days. The mind shapes the experience of them, and as you age, this collaboration becomes even more visible. The physical world marks the passage of decades in quiet, steady ways. Trees grow taller, buildings weather, light fixtures yellow with time. But your experience of those decades is coloured by the moments that mattered. The laughter that echoed through your home, the quiet evening shared with someone dear, the challenges that shaped you, the losses that softened you. The imprint of these experiences forms the psychological timeline you carry within you, running parallel to the cosmic one. This dual structure, the physical arrow and the psychological arrow, guides every human life. The physical arrow gives your days their irreversible nature, ensuring that events leave traces that cannot be undone. The psychological arrow gives your life meaning, making those traces part of your story. And when these two arrows point in the same direction, something gentle but profound emerges. The feeling that you are moving through time, not drifting randomly, not circling in loops, but moving forward, becoming someone new while still carrying the past with you. This movement is not always smooth. Sometimes the future feels heavy. Sometimes the past feels sharp. But even in those moments, you're held by the same alignment of cosmos and consciousness. You're carried forward by entropy as surely as you are pulled forward by your desires, your hopes, your memories, and your sense of becoming. As we move into our final session, we will step into the quietest part of this understanding, the soft, reflective space where the arrow of time becomes more than a concept or a physical law. It becomes an invitation, a reminder that though we cannot rewind the universe or erase the marks of the past, we can learn to live peacefully with the flow, allowing time to be not just a force that moves us forward, but a companion walking beside us. There is a moment, often late in the evening, when the world around you becomes quieter. The lights dim, the pace of the day loosens, and you may feel a gentle pause settling over everything. It is in these quiet moments that the arrow of time becomes less like an abstract idea and more like a companion, something that has walked beside you through every chapter of your life. In this final stretch of our journey, we'll rest with that companion for a while, feeling the softness of its presence, the quiet solemnity of its direction, and the strange comfort it brings. Time, as you've seen, is shaped by two worlds: the physical universe with its ever-spreading patterns and the inner world of memory, emotion, and imagination. Both worlds guide you forward, even when you wish they would stop or slow or rewind. And yet, there is a kind of peace in allowing them to move as they do, like accepting the steady pull of a river instead of fighting its current. If you look back on the path of your life, you might see moments that once felt overwhelming but now have softened into wisdom. You might see choices that shaped you without your realizing it at the time. You might see small joys that grew into treasured memories, or quiet losses that gradually changed the shape of your heart. Each of these moments sits gently behind you now, not lost, but resting in the wider landscape of your past. They are part of the world you carry within you, and ahead, the future remains open, not empty, but spacious. Its uncertainty can be intimidating, but it can also be liberating. Because nothing has been written yet, anything can be shaped. The arrow of time ensures that you cannot walk backward into what has passed, but it also invites you to walk forward into what can still become. The very fact that the future is not fixed gives your life its sense of possibility. There is comfort in recognizing that the passing of time is not a march, but a flow. You are not being pushed from moment to moment. You are being carried like a leaf on a gentle current. You do not need to control the river. You only need to move with it. This is where acceptance begins, not in resignation, but in understanding that the movements of time are woven into the fabric of everything you are and everything you experience. Think of all the evenings you've lived through. Some arrived at the end of loud, full days, others concluded quiet ones. But in each of them, time brought you to a place of rest, a moment when you could look back softly and look forward calmly. These two directions, reflection and anticipation, meet in the present like two tides touching. They create a stillness that allows you to feel your own existence with clarity. When you sit with that stillness, you may notice that the arrow of time is not harsh or rigid. It is gentle. It unfolds your life in a sequence that lets you grow, learn, and change. It creates space between who you once were and who you are becoming. It protects you from getting trapped in moments that should pass, even when they are painful. It lets you move beyond old versions of yourself so that new ones can emerge. Even loss, as difficult as it is, carries this gentle quality. You move through grief slowly, and with time, the sharpness softens. The memories remain, but their edges round out. What once felt unbearable becomes integrated into your story. This transformation is not something you force. It is something time does quietly, like sand smoothing the edges of a stone. And joy deepens with time too. Moments of beauty may fade from the present, but they often grow richer in memory. You carry them with you, letting them warm you on days when you need them most. Time, which takes some things away, also gives back in other forms. It gives perspective, compassion, gentleness. Even the simple act of breathing reflects the flow of time. Each breath rises and falls, a tiny cycle that mirrors the larger rhythms of your life. Inhale, and the future enters. Exhale, and the past releases. Between them lies the present, brief, precious, unfolding. Time is not only around you, it moves through you constantly. As this journey reaches its closing stretch, you may find that the arrow of time no longer feels like a force pulling you forward, but a companion walking quietly beside you. It is steady, patient, always there but never demanding. It asks only that you continue moving moment by moment, allowing the past to settle where it belongs and letting the future approach at its own pace. You do not need to hurry. You do not need to hold on tightly. You can let the arrow guide you gently, trusting that every experience, every memory, every emotion, every hope is part of the larger story of your life unfolding. And as you rest in this final moment of reflection, Perhaps you can feel a small sense of gratitude for time itself, for its capacity to heal, to reshape, to deepen, and to reveal. Time is not only something you travel through, it is something that supports you, teaches you, and offers you endless chances to begin again. Wherever you are listening from, at whatever point in your own timeline, may you feel held by the gentle current of time, and may you move into your next moment with peace,